I want to ask, do you know Japanese manga or anime? Have you watched Japanese anime? Like One Piece, Jujutsu Kaisen, Naruto, My Hero Academia. Because if you haven't watched it, I'm sure you will never understand what I'm going to talk today. So, inshallah, I'm sure you will understand. So today, for example, like One Piece, this is probably one of the most successful Japanese manga and anime in the world. And this is fiction. This is a fiction of history. It is a story about the pirates in the fictional world. However, like if you watch like a One Piece series, it has like 1,134 like episodes, so it's really long. But I strongly recommend you watch it. If you watch it, it's not simply the entertainment. Like if you look more carefully, we can see that it also contains the idea about justice or the power and how human beings should live. In Japan, for example, this one, the last one, this is one of the books have been published that collect famous quotes from One Piece character, as it's kind of like a Socrates or Aristotle. Like we see this One Piece as kind of philosophy. And outside Japan, there was also have you ever heard of Houthi pirates? You see like Yemeni pirates. So there was an interview in the tech, I think in the Tech Talk or the YouTube, that in one interview asked these Houthi pirates that have you ever watched any like Japanese anime? And he asked like, do you know Luffy? And there's one of the young men in Yemen, he said, of course that we watch One Piece. We're grown up with it. And he said, and now I'm happy that I'm engaged in this pirates interaction. So it suggests that One Piece is not only consumed as entertainment, but also internalized as a source of the inspiration. And in other words, it's not merely the product of the consumer culture. We just like it's not just like sitting on a chair and just watching anime and that's it. It's more than that. It is a source of imagination with a powerful and lasting influence on how people think and feel. And in Japan, there are like millions types of like Japanese anime or manga. For example, this one is like Luffy. This one, do you know Haikyuu? Is a volleyball in anime. And Goku, he's my favorite. I grew up in Goku. Or Tanjiro, or like Naruto. I don't know that one. Actually, yeah, 20% of the manga I don't know because I'm almost getting old. But Japanese manga and anime includes a wide variety of themes or the characters. Like some of the stories about the pirates, like One Piece, or the alchemist. Do you know Full Metal Alchemist? It's not Shōnen Jump, it's another company, but it's about alchemists, which draw from like a global, like a cultural, like a global or foreign culture. Or others are based on kind of a traditional Japanese culture, such as ninja, like Naruto, or samurai, or spiritual, like a sorcerer, like Jujutsu Kaisen. This diversity exists because manga, like a film or literature, is a form of expression without strict limits. So basically, as long as you have a pen, that you can draw like everything, that you can draw like every kind of a story. And it can fully combine the different cultural elements and ideas. So this like Japanese like manga or anime culture is not only for the Japanese, or even if the audience are like Japanese, that you can imagine like every kind of a story as long as you have the power of the imagination. But however, despite this diversity, there is an important point that we must not overlook. If we examine this story carefully, then we can find that their narrative structures are consistently influenced by one central idea. In Japan, it is called the traditional philosophy called the outlaw. Have you ever heard the word yakuza? Yakuza, like a mafia. So this shonen manga is like a modern like a cultural form. But if we analyze the narrative structure, it's deeply influenced by the Japanese traditional storytelling of this yakuza, like a mafia story, the story of the outlaw. For example, the character Monkey D. Luffy in One Piece is deeply influenced by the story of the Japanese yakuza Shimizu Jirocho. So he looks like he is a pirate, but his original inspiration is this Japanese yakuza guy. And here, this term yakuza or mafia does not simply mean a criminal. I mean, of course he's a criminal, but it's more than the criminal. And rather, it refers in its idolized form to the person who possesses like pride as an outlaw, as someone who stands against a violent or unjust power and protects the weak. And this is the important distinction because this outlaw is not defined by just breaking the law or the spreading violence. That he is defined by his relationship to like justice. Yes. And for those in the UK, it may be like easier to understand this idea by thinking like Robin Hood, famous legendary like outlaw, like it's a half fiction, like half like a historical figure, and he is also like not a simple criminal. He resists unjust authority and protects the ordinary people. However, this Japanese manga does something more complex than simply repeating such stories. Like we just like writing this 1,000 kinds of like Robin Hood stories. Like we analyze the story structure, but we draw like a different type of a character. And this is like the power of the fiction. Like the good fiction is not about like creating a compelling story, but it also must be like a good reflection of the reality or the reflection of the society. Have you watched the Harry Potter series? Well, you know Harry Potter, right? I'm sure you know Harry Potter. For example, there is the like a villain called Voldemort. And have you watched the movie? Like, what was the like goal of the Voldemort? To create like a pure wizarding world. So he classified a human being into the pure blood and half blood and the mud blood. And he believed that only the pure-blooded wizard have the rights to like live in the wizarding world. And he tried to like wipe out the half-blood, what is called like mud blood. Wizard, come from like a non-wizarding, like a family. Like this is the metaphor of the racism, right? This is the metaphor of the philosophy or like a niche, or maybe like a philosophy of the nation state. Or another like example is the Paddington Bear. It's my like daughter's favorite. Like I watched it with my daughter, now she's 2 years old. But before my daughter was born, I didn't know much about this Paddington Bear. But I think that it's the first episode, or maybe the second episode. Like he introduced himself. That he said that so he lives in the UK, but he said he came from like darkest Peru. I mean, this darkest Peru has some like Orientalistic, I don't know, kind of like flavor. But this story itself is also like a metaphor of the immigrants. Immigrants who came from outside the UK and who tried to like survive in the society. So this is all about like ethical or like a moral imagination when you create about like fictional story. And Japanese manga is also the same. Like when you watch like a Naruto's or like a One Piece or My Hero Academia or like Jujutsu Kaisen or a Full Metal Alchemist, like this is not just like a superficial fictional story. Like this reflects actually like historical background of like Japanese like history. It means that there is a reason that why we Japanese are trying to produce like Japanese manga anime, and also try to put some like moral messages in our stories. For example, one important reason about this birth of the Japanese manga anime, like in Japan, historical experience during the Second World War. So before during the war, the moral education in Japan was closely connected to the militarism. It means that in this education, it encouraged loyalty to the state and obedience to the authorities. It means that definition of the good people or the bad people depends on how you're loyal to like a nation state. But however, after the war, this system was deeply questioned. Moral education within a nation state is not always designed to create like independent ethical individuals. Rather, it often exists to maintain the system of the state itself. And when such education becomes connected with like a colonialism or imperialism, for example, have you ever heard the history of Japan? Japan is not like, how can I say? Japan is also like the Japanese empire, and we also like colonizing the neighboring country. And our like a moral education or ethical education is like a tool for this expansionism. So Japan experienced this like tragedy And this experience led to the deep reflection of the nature of the morality or authority, or the ethical education. And during the period when Japan was under American control, have you ever heard of atomic bomb, like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that was bombed by America? And after the Second World War, Japan was part of the colony of America. And many ideas that previously been taught as like a moral truth were rejected as inappropriate education. For example, this was a textbook was used after the Second World War. So this was the textbook on the moral education. And can you see this like a black, most of the sentences were erased, was placed. This was erased by American Army because they think that this textbook is not appropriate to create like a good citizen. But for whom? For America. So the well-known Japanese manga artist, the Takashi Yanase, once reflected on this experience. So he said at the time that people learned how fragile the idea of justice of the state really is. And what they consider right can easily change like this, depending on the war or the era. And in the post-war period, Japan has become closely aligned with the global. And for example, now this is our new prime minister, the Sanae Takaichi. And can you see like how she behaving in the next to the Trump? So in the post-war period, Japan also became closely aligned with the global political order led by the United States and its allies. And by the way, now our country is also a strong supporter of Israel. So. And within such a framework, the official narratives of justice also often appear as kind of stable or unquestioned. But however, this apparent stability did not eliminate deeper tensions. Rather, those tensions were often expressed indirectly through cultural form. So if you see just like a political side of Japan, you may think that Japan is just like following American interest. But if you look at the popular culture, like Japanese manga and anime, these cultural forms are consistently trying to teach the Japanese audiences to gain the power of critical thinking. So Japanese began to look for something that could not be easily broken or easily changed, like something unbreakable. Not a form of justice defined by the state, but which can change depending on the time and the political situation, but deeper and more hoping that now this is the time that she might be accepted. And however, when they finally met, something unexpected happened, according to the Ozawa Yuko. They usually immediately recognize her, even though her appearance changed a lot. That he did not hesitate, or he did not express surprise. He did not treat her as someone who had changed. He simply said, it's Ozawa, long time no see. And at that moment, the Ozawa experienced the profound realization of the humanity. So she understood that Yuji had always seen her as beautiful, not because her outward appearances, but inside beauty, the inner quality. But what truly shocked her is not Yuji's reaction, but her own misunderstanding. So she realized that she has been living according to the standards of that she herself once rejected. So there is a famous line in the Jujutsu Kaisen. The Ozawa Yuko said that I have been living by the standards of the very people I dislike. And this moment is so. Do you know what the meaning of Jujutsu Kaisen? Jujutsu means a curse, and Kaisen means whirling around. So this is how the author is trying to describe the curse of the society. If you internalize twisted values of the modernity, that you will never escape from being a victim of this curse. And this is what if you look at the story of the Jujutsu Kaisen, this is what the author is constantly trying to tell. So, and within this narrative, so Itadori Yuji is such, for me, is appealing like a character because he is constantly portrayed as what we may call an independent moral subject. That he does not surrender his judgment to oppressive social norms or to the malice that exists within society. When he is surrounded by violence or fear or even ambiguity, he maintains a core sense of what is right, or he never loses the chance of continue thinking what is right and what is wrong. So his moral orientation is not defined by external authority, but by the internal commitment to the dignity of the others. And in contrast to Yuji, the main villain, this Mahito, represents something fundamentally different. So Mahito is described as the curse of humans. It means he is the essence of the dark side of humanity, the being that emerged from human fear and hatred. And his power is ability to distort the human soul, to reshape it at will. And this ability is also not merely a supernatural device within society, but a function as a powerful metaphor. So to distort the soul is to distort the criteria by which a person understands themselves. So it means forcing a person to adapt external standards of value, whether those standards are related to beauty or success or social status or approval. So in this sense, this Mahito represents the violence of imposed value system. He does not simply destroy individuals, but he reshapes them according to the arbitrary standards. That he turns identity into something unstable and manipulable. So, for example, in the last lecture, when you with Professor Salman Saeed, he mentioned about, for example, the word Islamophobia. For example, this Islamophobia, was it coined by the Muslim or non-Muslim? Is this our standards? Our goal is to overcome Islamophobia, or we just respond to Islamophobia? No, because if we just confine ourselves with the so-called this narrative, then we never escape from just become the consumer of this narrative. And this is also what the Jujutsu Kaisen is constantly telling. Our goal is not just fight against the curses, but to remember what the humanity is, or what we can do to protect the humanity, not just analyzing the curses or just defending against the curses. So another important aspect of Jujutsu Kaisen is not only about the protagonist, but also the presence of comparing mentors. Have you ever heard of a Japanese word senpai or sensei? So sensei is a master, and senpai is elders. Also, one of my favorite so-called senpai in the Jujutsu Kaisen story is called Nanami. So this Nanami is constructed within the story as a representative of what we might call mature adult, senpai or the sensei. So at first glance, he appears to be someone who has already achieved a stable and complete sense of self. However, what is important is that within the story is that Nanami is not presented as the finished or perfect adult, perfect human being. Instead, the narrative carefully depicts the process of his decision as well as his psychological struggles. For example, when he was young, so Nanami was not the strongest character in the story, and he is fully aware of this. When comparing to this Gojo Satoru, which is considered strongest character in the story, he didn't have any superior superpowers, or Nanami is not born from a noble family, and what is worse, during his youth when he was students, Nanami experienced a series of tragedy and loss. And these experiences deeply affect him and eventually led him to leave the world of this Jujutsu sorceress. And then, instead, he should live in what we might call ordinary society, non-Jujutsu a society. So he becomes, he started work in a company. So he started to seek a good career. So at this stage of his life, he begins to pursue what society defines as success, a better career, better salary, maybe good PhD. Well, he didn't go to the PhD program, but or more stable and a comfortable life. These are the standards that modern society presents as meaningful. And however, as the time passes, that he becomes mentally exhausted. The more he followed these standards, good career, good salary, the more he felt a sense of emptiness. But then one day, that something very small happens. So at the bakery, so there was a famous bakery he often visited. He noticed like this, the minor curses was attached to the woman working there. And at the time, he just ignored it because at the time he was not a sorcerer anymore. So he think that there are the other sorcerer made like a kill this small, the curse. But he decided to eliminate it. So from the perspective of this big story of the Jujutsu Kaisen, this is not like something important. This is like a minor event. But this is a very small action. But this woman was deeply grateful. And she said to him, thank you. And this moment is extremely important for Nanami Kent. Because through this simple interaction, Nanami realized something fundamental. So he understood that in order to live as a human being, there are things more important than career, money, or social status. So what matters is something else. So even the smallest action, just eliminate the small curse. To make a choice that is not centered on oneself, like not your own your life, for someone's life. But we may describe this as a form of altruistic moral centrality. That in Arabic we call ithar. It means like self-sacrifice and altruism. So it is the ability to act from the center that is not defined by external standards, but by the commitment to the others. So and this is the moment that he decided to go back to jujutsu, a world. But also at the same time, what is interesting about this Jujutsu Kaisen story is that it also tells that this choosing the responsibility is not something that easy. That this is Nanami does not become simple, moral, a perfect, hero. Like he continues to struggle, and sometimes, or not sometimes, not often, he dreams different kind of life, like a peaceful life without responsibility or without a conflict. So he cannot forget the possibility of this comfortable life. So, but this is not just fictional story, but this is a reality of the every individual who live in this a dunya. So to live in a society is not a simple process of making the right choice, but it is a continuous series of choices and also the continuous series of doubts and regrets. And what is interesting in the story is that Nanami embodies this tension, or contradiction, that he chooses the path of responsibility, but he also carries the burden of this choice. And also, I'm also reading another Shōnen manga, One Piece, or do you know Demon Slayer? This is also kind of action, samurai-ish, a manga. So Shōnen manga also encourages us to reflect on the idea of masculinity, manliness. For example, in recent years, we have seen the rise of what we call masculinity identity. Do you know this testosterone industry? There are so many advertisements that encourage men to take supplements, or I don't know, or online lesson, or cooking food to increase the testosterone, which I think this is so ridiculous. So in this framework, the masculinity or even male happiness is treated as something that being measured quantitatively through hormones. So being a male or becoming man is just the amount of testosterone that we have in the body. And this is such a stupid and unusual approach, because it's just something as complex as identity or the character or the moral responsibility can be reduced to the biological indicators. So in this sense, this is similar to the scouter device in a Dragon Ball. So if you have a special device, and if you can see how much testosterone that the men have, then you can see exactly the man you should be married with. Manliness is more than that. For example, in the Demon Slayer or Kimetsu no Yaiba in Japanese, that you can see this another type of philosophy of masculinity. So the main character, such as Kamado Tanjiro. So Tanjiro is not like Andrew Tate. Well, I don't know if this is a good example or not, but Tanjiro is not valued in the story because of his social position or his birth. Or he is not like a great because he came from like special, like a lineage. But instead he is recognized for something else. He is recognized for the sense of the responsibility. So if you watch the Demon Slayer, you will see lots of scenes that many characters is talking to him that be a man or become a man. Don't run away. Why are you sleeping? You're a man. Why you say that it hurts? You're a man. Or something that Tanjiro says that, well, I am the eldest from the family, so that's why I need to endure. This is all about. This is not about like muscles. This is about like the responsibility. And also, do you know? I don't know how many we watch Demon Slayer, but there's another character called Rengoku Kyojuro. You know, like a lion here, like senpai, which heavily influenced the Kamado Tanjiro. And there was like important, like iconic like dialogue between his mother and Kyojuro. So before her mother's death, Rengoku's mother tells him something very important. So he explained why he was born strong. And her answer is quite simple and direct. She said, to save the weak. She said, he was given strength in order to protect those who are weak, who don't have the power. So here, strength is not a privilege. It is, again, about responsibility. So this Demon Slayer, like, if you only see about this action scene, you would just see it as like superficial, like samurai, like an anime. But the philosophy of Demon Slayer is a responsibility. Just one message about what is the responsibility as a human being. So if you compare it with a contemporary like discourse or narrative in the masculinity, the contrasts become very clear. For example, today we are surrounded by, as I said, a strange idea about masculinity. Some people believe that masculinity is about just expressed by being loud or aggressive or like dominant. Or in these models, there is no sense of like regret, like Nanami Kent in Jujutsu Kaisen, or no sense of burden, or then no sense of inner struggle, like a Kamado Tanjiro. Instead, masculinity becomes a kind of performance or a business model built on pleasure and display. And in the last example, this one is also from One Piece. It's called Whitebeard. So Japanese shonen manga is always try to articulate a different kind of masculinity, which is like based on resilience, supported by the compassion. The powerful example of this can be found in One Piece in the character called Whitebeard, the Edward Newgate. The Whitebeard is depicted as one of the strongest pirates in the story. However, his strength is not used for domination. Instead, it is used to protect others. He stands against the oppressive power, like Marine, or maybe further, it turns out he also fighting against this world government. So, and he treats his crew not as subordinates, but as sons, the family. So his masculinity is not defined by control, but it is defined by care. So, and this brings us back to the central theme. What is the philosophy of this Japanese like shonen manga or Japanese like shonen, like anime? So, we see the Japanese manga is not simply telling stories. So, it is constructing the way of thinking or maybe way of rethinking about humanity. So, it challenges the idea, like dominant idea, that human value can be measured. Or it challenges the dominant idea that identity can be reduced to the numbers or the status or the performance. But instead, it presents a different model. The model in which masculinity is not about like dominance or just power, but about the responsibility, like Kamado Tanjiro showed. Or maybe the Luffy has been showing in the series. Or not about the power, but about how that power is used. So in this sense, shonen manga once again becomes a medium of this moral or the ethical imagination. So it encourages us to like think or encourages us to reconstruct the way of thinking or see the humanity is. So these are some example story. And today's title is Islam and Manga and Moral Education. So I also want to mention about then, okay, yeah, there's a way that we Muslim audiences to, how can I say, like enjoy the Japanese manga or enjoy Japanese anime, but as the young, like Muslim, well, I'm not young anymore, but you are young. So yeah, young, like Muslim, like students, I think we should think about that further. It means like consuming those like foreign culture is like not enough. I mean like, there's also like this now is a time that we need to create our own story. We need to create our narrative. Because have you ever heard of Ms. Marvel, the Marvel Hero Comic series, Ms. Marvel? So Disney company, that when that anime, not anime, it was a live action series. When the series came out, the Disney advertised this Ms. Marvel as their like first like Muslim like hero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I watched the full series. It's not bad. I enjoyed watching it, but it was not like a Muslim Marvel like hero. But what is depicted in the series is just a life of the Pakistani American in New York. And again, yeah, I mean, she's a Muslim, but for example, we need to think, being a Pakistani and being a Muslim is like, has a different like dimension. Yes, of course, there is a Muslim Pakistani, but also there are non-Muslim Pakistanis. Or there is like and also what is the risk about this kind of a narrative is that it reduced the Muslimness into the ethnicity. But thinking about Muslimness is like more than that. And so does like a Japanese Muslim. So like, it is not enough to just criticize like Ms. Marvel or just criticize like Hollywood like industry or just complain about how we are represented or depicted in the entertainment. We need to create our own story. And right now, this is still ongoing, but I also working with the Egyptian like Muslim team to create our own like a manga story. So I'm writing a script and also doing a character designing. And this like right one is the Belgian Muslim diaspora who exiled to the medieval Japan, and he became friends with a young like a Japanese samurai. I mean, this is a fictional story, and this is my experiment. So I'm going to show you if it's successful, or maybe I will fail. But what is important is this process. Like, just complaining is like not enough. Like, you need to like take a pen and start drawing your own stories, or start like drawing your own character, or like not just like, and through this process, I believe that true critical thinking can emerge from like a Muslim like a society. Okay, thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Jazakallah khairan.